Hello and welcome to episode 59 of the TRUUMAN Podcast, the podcast designed to create a generation of self-defined men. Today, I'm joined by Dave Scholes. Dave, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks, mate. How's yourself?
Good. I'm very well, thank you. I'm super excited
Excellent.
for this one. But first, as always, Dave, in your own words, what makes you a man?
I think it's the comfort of being yourself, the comfort of being something that's not defined by somebody else, by social media, by a stereotype that's been around for years and years. I think being a man is about whatever that version looks like for you, and that for me has been something probably over a number of years I've developed a little bit on my journey doing what we do. But I think being comfortable in your own skin is a massive thing.
Is that your definition of the difference between man and boy? I guess it's that comfort.
I think it is. I think it's that comfort of not necessarily meeting all the criteria that everybody says you should be, but being comfortable with some of those things that if they are you, and equally being comfortable if they're not, and deciding and being comfortable in deciding what that looks like for you. You know, you're not mirroring everybody else because everybody is unique, aren't they, on the planet? And if you find that, I think actually the more manly you become, I think you become more comfortable in, areas of being gentle and being kind and all those non-blokey stereotypes. I think the more you can embrace that kind of thing, the more you actually understand yourself and become the best version of you, which is clearly the best version that you can be, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. So, Dave, why don't you tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you said, Dave Scholes, I'm the founder of an organisation called Six Connections, based in Burnley in Lancashire. That's where I've always lived. It's where I grew up, and it's where I've stayed after a brief trip to uni and back. And following my own experience around mental health, the loss of a friend a number of years ago, we've set up an organisation primarily designed to help people to be a little bit more open about a difficult conversation, about a topic that's still got a load of stigma attached to it, especially from a male perspective, to help people to talk about the subject when they're doing well, rather than just at a point of challenge, and to normalise it in places like the pub, a coffee shop, on a footy game, picking your kids up from school, so that this isn't just something that we talk about close to crisis or when it's too late. This is a normal subject in the same way that you would talk about physical health and many other things. So we've tried to, I guess, not lighten a difficult subject, but we've tried to make a difficult subject more accessible.
So I wrote an article the other week in regards to something around this. There's a worrying statistic that 1 in 5 men don't reach the age of 65. So this is
Yeah.
additional to suicide. There's obviously other health conditions that affect
Yep.
men, and it was essentially along the lines of, why do you start playing golf when you get older? Because you've gone from five-a-side to a four ball
Yeah.
essentially. Um,
Yeah.
and it's definitely needed. But let's get into that, because it is a tough conversation and it is a tough topic. So,
Yeah.
what are some of the barriers that you find in a typical bloke when it comes to this conversation?
I think social media is a massive issue. I think it's a massive issue across mental health as a general rule. I was having a conversation only yesterday with somebody that I kind of said that we've almost created this scenario where it's actually easier for blokes not to talk about this subject, because we've created this thing that says, I'm a bloke, so I don't talk. Now, I've not created that. I talk about this subject all the time, as do you, as do a lot of the people that I know. But if you've created something that effectively says blokes don't talk around this subject, so they won't, and women do over a lovely cup of tea, then you've created an absolute false stereotype that means if you're a quiet lady that doesn't want to talk, you're not the norm. And if you're a bloke that wants to talk, you're not the norm. So it's a difficult thing. And I think, there's the whole kind of magazine and pop culture and all that kind of stuff that doesn't help. I've got a lot of pals in this kind of realm that we work in that are doing a lot around breaking down some of those stigmas and changing some of those things. But I think, yeah, I think we've created a rod for our own back, really, by creating a sweeping statement for the globe rather than something that allows you to be curious. Curious is a word we use a lot, I think, and I think it's sometimes that blokey thing of, you told you the fixer, you told you the breadwinner, you told all this kind of stupid Victorian stuff that actually stops you being curious around the subject, because that's all that will break down the stigma of mental health. If people are more curious about the subject, even if they only find out a little bit more than they knew, and didn't feel like they had to fix everything, or as soon as they start the conversation, there has to be a solution. That's not how it works, but it is the way a lot of people think, sadly, which means that they don't talk about it at all because they don't think they've got the answers.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely get onto that side of things in regards to how to deal with someone wanting the conversation, I guess. But if it's okay with you, Dave, I'd really love to hear a little bit about the story around your friend and
Yep.
sort of the lead up
Yep.
to that. Again, parallels are just, I think, are really powerful for people. If someone can draw something from this story, then it will be really
Absolutely.
helpful.
Yeah, 100%. And I've always said that, the power of story. Not everybody can relate to what I've been through, but they can maybe relate to some of the things that I've done, or some of the experiences I had, and make that something that they can use, or a version of it. So, yeah, very, very long story short, really. Ian, my pal that died, was my best pal from uni. We were in a band many, many years ago now. Um, and yeah, literally, there was a phone call 14 years ago from one of the other lads in the band that said he was no longer on the planet. And that was a tough phone call. That's a phone call. I'm not very good at remembering much, but I can remember an awful lot about that phone call, where I was, what happened, and all that kind of stuff. And like a lot of people say, he was the last person on the planet. If you'd have said to me, pick one of your mates that would never ever do that, that would be the mate that I would have picked. Life and soul of the party. He was a big, whopping, strong Cockney fella, who I met on my first day at uni. Interestingly, he was in the queue before me to register for university. And yeah, he was absolutely opposite to me. I was nervous and frightened about everything. He'd just been around Australia for the last 12 months and rocked up to uni without a pen, and that was our opening gambit. He turned around and went, "Have you got a pen, mate?" And after I'd crapped myself looking at this bloke, he turned around a couple of minutes later and went, "Are you okay?" And I'll remember it to this day. I said, "No, I'm not really. I'm a bit nervous about this. It's a bit overwhelming." And he went, "Yeah, I am as well." And there was just a bit of me went, "You don't look like you're nervous about anything. You don't look like you'd be nervous about whatever." And for the first couple of weeks of uni, he literally just called for me every single day and just went, "I'm doing this, I'm going here, I'm going this bar. Do you want to come? This is my new pal I've met," all that kind of stuff. And I didn't realise it until years later. He just looked after me for 2 weeks. He did something that was so natural to him. He went, "I think you're all right. I'll look after you for a bit." And weirdly, over the years, there were massive points where I looked after him as well in very different ways. And the saddest bit about his passing was I went into this mode of going, "It's my fault." The most unlogical thing on the planet. But 14 years ago, people weren't talking about mental health like they are today. And I just got in this rut of going, I should have seen something, should have done something. He was a guy I wasn't seeing every day like I was at uni. This was years
Yeah.
after we'd left, and I probably saw him 3 or 4 times a year at reunions and weddings and bits and bobs. But I went through a journey that I call recovery. It feels a bit dramatic, but it was for me. It was unpacking some of this stuff and getting the fact from the fiction, and dealing with that process, really. And I got a load of brilliant support over the years, professional support that worked for me. But my first experience in mental health really was going to a GP and explaining what had happened, and being told, because I love football and snowboarding, I should go and enjoy my life. And I'd walked into a GP surgery saying my mate's died and I don't really know what to do with this. And walked out of there a little bit lost, a little bit like putting your car in the garage. You expect somebody to fix it for you. you don't really know anything about what's wrong, but there's a level of trust there, and that didn't happen to me. I was lucky. I came out and I had a really good friend network, I had a really good family network, some of which were working within the healthcare industry, and they pointed me in the direction of some options. And that's all it was really, mate. They were just options for me, some of which, again, were great, some of which didn't work for me. But it was the understanding that that didn't mean I was wrong or I was failing. It just meant it wasn't the right thing. You know, I use sport as an analogy all the time. I love playing footy. I hate playing golf. Doesn't mean I'm a bad sports person. I just don't like golf. And that's what it was. Equally, at the time, I was working in the charitable sector. We were doing a lot of work with kind of recovering addicts, lads coming out of the prison network, homelessness. Helping other people was a massive factor for me. But equally, in the space that we now operate, it helped me to understand what was actually available locally. You know, I didn't want to signpost some of these lads into professional care, lads that I met every week and saw every week that I felt I was giving a level of comfort and care and help to. I didn't want to pass them on to somebody that wasn't going to do that. And it became less about the services available, but more about the people that were delivering those services. And that combination of getting some help myself, helping other people, and just having this group of mates that went, look, Dave, I can't fix it. I can't necessarily make it better. But if you ever want a brew or a beer, whenever it is, I'm here to listen. I'm here to talk about anything else. That combination was the stuff that really helped me. And over the years, you know, I needed the counselling less. I needed some of those techniques less. But I never stopped needing my mates. And you know, they're still my go-to now. And that's how we got to today, really. I just reached a point 7 years ago where I got out of bed literally one morning and went, I want to create a legacy for my mate. And everybody went, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. But that's not the end of the story. I'm not finishing a story with that ending for someone that doesn't deserve that ending, who was just really struggling with some really tough clinical illness. So that's kind of how this all developed, really.
Yeah, I think when it comes to suicide and male suicide specifically, I think a lot of people, especially friends, are like, what could I have done? Why did he do it? Why didn't he come and talk to me? We could have got through this. But I think you finished it off quite nicely there with, it is a medical condition, right? And sometimes no matter what you do, there's nothing you can do, I guess.
Yeah.
So
100%. Yeah. And I think one of the big things was I went through multiple touch points probably over the years where I thought, I wonder whether I could have done something there. You know, I find out things about the challenges in Ian's life. I've got a really good relationship with his sister who's written a brilliant series of blog articles about her journey through Ian's life, Ian's death and beyond, and her own challenges. And having those conversations and really getting to the crux of what was going on, I've kind of looked at it and gone, do you know what, there might have been a couple of points where I could have intervened a little bit more. Could I have changed the outcome? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And I veer towards the point of probably not, because you can't change the outcome of everybody, because it is an illness. Like you say, it's a clinical illness. And I kind of came back and went, well, if we can get more people talking about this conversation at an earlier stage, getting more people talking about this subject when they're doing great, if we can get less people moving down that journey of challenge because they've got more information, more resources available, more options, that's what we're going to try and do. If we just try and deal with people at crisis all the time, we're going to continue to keep the stats because we'll win some, and in that most horrible fashion, we'll lose some as well. This has to be about prevention.
Yeah, it's a lot of stuff that is available is crisis, right? It's like dragging the bodies out of the river rather than looking at where they've sort of fallen in, which is a great quote. Can't remember who said it, but there you go. It's
absolutely right. Yeah, and we found, that's where the finances are. We're set up as a CIC. A lot of the finance, people have turned around to me and said, if you were in crisis support, we could find you a truckload of money. Because you're in prevention, there's not a lot out there. Because actually it's tearing down from a wider medical system that's just starting to understand that this probably needs to tear down. But until that's understood fully in the NHS, then it drops down to the next tier, it'll be be 10 years before an organisation, probably like ourselves, is benefiting from a prevention-based model. But again, that's the nature of the size of the problem and the challenges, sadly, that the solutions have got at the present moment of time.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I guess it sort of boils down to stats in the sense of what can we show for our pound, which is
Yeah,
the sad truth
yeah,
that any pound that's
true.
spent in government
Yeah,
or business, right? It's like, where does it
yeah,
go? And yeah, that's just capitalism 101. In
yeah, it is. Yeah,
in regards to, I guess, that starting point. So I find quite commonly now, especially with my friends and people of that I know, it's quite common for them to say, if you ever need anything, you know where I am, or I'm always open for
yeah,
a chat, and all these things. Now, maybe there's times where I probably should have taken them up on that, and I probably should have had a chat with them. So, how do you encourage people as individuals to have those conversations? And then, more importantly, which I think you sort of mentioned at the beginning, which is it's all well and good saying, I'm happy to have this conversation, but how do you receive that conversation when you do end up having it?
yeah. I think we've gone really heavy on this being about relationship. There's a lot of stuff out there from a support point of view within the workplace, beyond the workplace, but this boils down to, if you've got a relationship with somebody that's a genuine relationship, you're more likely to talk about this subject with them. They might not be the starting point, to be fair. You might want a starting point with a complete stranger or some digital tech or whatever. But we talk a lot in our training sessions around, what does conversation look like to you? How do you like to have a conversation? And we're talking normal conversations here. And equally, how do you like to be listened to? How do you feel heard? How do you feel understood? And when we move that across into conversations around mental health and well-being, we're saying to people, if your chosen conversation is with your mate in the pub over a beer, why would you then choose to have a difficult conversation with your mate in a closed space, in a work environment with four white walls? You don't need to change your style often to start the conversation. And I think a lot of people don't have the conversation because they feel like it needs to happen all at once.
Yeah.
There's a version of me that has the football conversation, and then there's a version of me that has the serious conversation. I'm a big believer in, if you've got a banter-esque relationship with your mate, continue to be funny and do all the jovial stuff while you're talking about the tough stuff, and then dip out of it for a while and talk about who's playing up front for your footy team on a Saturday or what you're having for tea. It doesn't matter. And equally, this isn't a conversation that has to take place in one evening or at
Yeah.
one designated time. And I think a lot of people make that mistake in terms of they try and open up with a friend or they reach out to a friend and they get nothing back. So they've gone, well, it didn't work, so I'm not going to have a go at that again. This could be 3, 4, 5 conversations of absolute silence where your job is just to say, look, if you ever need anything, I'm here. And for that person to 100% know that that's true, it might be, those conversations of silence before the actual conversation of care starts. And I think the more natural you can make the unnatural, the better this is. A lot of people talk about going out for a walk because you stood next to somebody. I've got a mate that is one of my biggest supporters in this space that's looked after me massively, and we can sit with a beer for half an hour and not say a word. My missus cannot understand how that works, but we don't need to say anything because we know if we needed to, we could. And some weeks we talk about footy and some weeks we talk about the tough stuff, and that's all right. I think tech, for all it gets slated, actually is a really good option as well. It is a good introduction for people. If you get to a point where your mate knows that you're up for having a conversation just because you send them a text message saying beer, because that's what you normally do.
Yeah.
And that's, for want of a better thing, it's a code word. If you say beer, you're not in a good place. So you've literally walked into the pub going, all right, normal environment, we're comfortable here, we come here many times, but we know today there's something not quite right. And again, you've already jumped over the hurdle or the barrier or the brick wall or whatever you want to call it by just doing something that's quite natural. And again, in our training sessions, we encourage people to talk about this stuff and go away and put it into play. And some of the ridiculousness of how they interact with the mates, certainly blokes, because we've got a style all of our own. How they get those mates to open up with conversations can just be totally ridiculous. But equally, it works for them, because what works for me and you having a conversation will be totally different to some of our other pals, won't it? And that's how it has to be.
Yeah. When I first started this, the whole purpose of it was around getting men to talk. In fact, but one of the first conversations that I had with a friend was sort of like, it'd be interesting to get your opinion on this. So we talked about why we weren't having these conversations regularly. And one of the things was that you normally lead with the sentence, "Oh, can I have a chat?" And that starts to put a bit of eeriness to it, or a little bit of I know you'll be a massive Love Island fan, Dave. So a bit of Love Island.
Yeah, that's right up my street there. Yeah, you've nailed it. Guilty pleasure.
Yeah, can I take you for a chat? It's that kind of scenario, right? But this is obviously all new to me, and these sort of ideas and these sort of just having the conversation in the conversation is an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah, so I think the interesting thing as well, when you do training course, and I've done a lot of the training course that are out there, the suicide prevention ones, mental health first aid, which are brilliant courses. They are exceptional. Everybody should do them, but actually they're not designed to teach you how to have a conversation with your mate, because they don't know your mate. So a lot of the set up lines in the introduction. So, we produced a beer not long ago called Ask Twice. That's another thing that we do, which I'll chat about in a minute. But the Ask Twice campaign is a brilliant thing, but actually it's restrictive, because Ask Twice, if you only ask twice, that might not be enough for the person you're speaking to. It might be you need to ask 100 times, and equally, I got a little bit brassed off with the campaign elements of going, brilliant, ask twice is fantastic. What if your mate then goes, yeah, I'm not all right, and you've no idea what to do next? Because actually, by just having a campaign that's about talking and opening up can be dangerous. It can be something that actually adds the restriction. I've just unpacked my world with you, and you're looking at me blankly because you don't know how to receive that information. You're already second guessing what you're going to do next. You're not actually listening to what I'm saying because you're panicking that much. Or equally, going back to that male stereotype, you're trying to think about how you're going to fix this because you're really uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Equally, those moments of silence, we say this a lot. If somebody's unpacking this for the first time, there will be a lot of quiet because they're trying to get things out. If you're uncomfortable like I am with silence, and you start filling gaps, you're not getting the information you need. You're creating it on your terms. You make it about you. I went through that, so let me tell you what I did. It'll fix you. Well, you're not the same. People can go through the same thing as me, but how they deal with those circumstances will vary dramatically based on resilience, support network, and multiple other things. So, yeah, one-size-fits-all solutions, I think, have been a bit of a danger in this space. People kind of telling you how it should work. And if it doesn't, you feeling like you've failed. This could be months or years worth of conversation where, as long as you're there for somebody and they know you're there, it sounds harsh, but there's not much more that you can do. You can't force somebody to speak. You can create an environment where it's more comfortable and you can provide options. They might not want to speak to you, but speaking to your closest mate might not be the thing. Speaking to a complete stranger or a professional might be that. And just because they choose not to speak to you doesn't mean you failed, which is, again, a bit of a blokey thing, isn't it? Going, oh, well, I couldn't fix this, so if I fail. No, you're just not the right person or the right time, are you? There's a lot of stuff that challenges male stereotype in this. And I think that's where a lot of the problems come.
I think the biggest one for me is still vulnerability. I think whether we want to redefine masculinity and we want to talk about being vulnerable and we want to talk about all these things and how it's good, at the end of the day, there is a biological element to a man with
Yep.
testosterone and masculine
Yep.
tendencies, that opening up and being vulnerable to another male is
Mm-hmm.
arguably not good for survival. Yes,
Yeah.
we now live in nice houses and warmth, and we're not in caves, but there is still an element of biology there.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I totally agree. And I think, again, that's something that comes back into our world an awful lot. And I think the flip side to that is the vulnerability is often just assumed that it's for the person that's struggling, not for the person that maybe has spotted something that feels like they should say something. And I think you're absolutely right. I think that vulnerability to not share information when you are struggling is made even worse by the whole biology that's going on in your head. You know, your head's telling you a lot of false stuff that isn't fact. I think from a vulnerability point of view, if we could work on the vulnerability of the friend, the colleague, the family member, to maybe address some of those conversations earlier and make that route to support more open and accessible and get over their own vulnerability a little bit, I think that makes life easier. You know, my experience all the way through, and I'm still not great at it today, it takes me a while to open up when I'm struggling about stuff because I've got my own coping mechanisms that aren't healthy for me that I know of, but it takes me a little bit longer to open up. If one of my pals turns around and goes, "You're not all right," I know enough about myself and the coping to go, "Okay, you're giving me the space to do this," and I'll unpack. But again, I think with mental health and certainly male mental health, the focus is often on the person that's struggling, who is going to find it a lot harder to talk. Of course, they are. This is a brand new subject. It's something that you've been potentially dealing with for years and feel like you're not being successful at. The focus again goes on to them, not necessarily onto the person that maybe opens up an opportunity or a safe space to, again, be curious with that conversation. You know, you don't need to spill everything, but just sharing something might be enough to trigger that. And I think it's just maybe about rotating where that vulnerability could be supported um, in the person that's the support mechanism.
Yeah, it's really tough. It's really, really, really tough for men. I think. Thank you for saying that you're not perfect, because a lot of people who are in this space that are talking, they almost have this, I guess, this halo above their head of like, well, he can do it, and
Yeah,
he's always right. He knows what he's doing. Like, but that's not the case, right? Life is not perfect. Things
no,
happen, and I think the one thing that I think men really struggle with is the fact that there is no solution to this. This Once you start working on it, it's
yeah,
just a constant working on it. There is no doing this, doing that, and then everything's better. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't.
yeah.
And I don't know, for me, some days it's a bit like,
It,
I wish I just had some ignorance.
yeah, do you know what? And I think there's a danger in that, and again, I think it's about how you shape it. There's two really interesting things in what you said there, because there is an expectation when you're in this space that you suddenly fixed. Because I can talk to people all day, every day about what they should do, and sometimes be knowing full well that I'm not listening to my own advice. And the thing that I've learned in that space is that I'm just delivering a training model. Um, to actually apply it for myself, I have to do exactly the same things as what I'm telling the people in the room to do, which is have the people around me that are looking after me when I'm struggling, or the people that I reach out to. If I didn't have that network at all, you know, we have a really simple 6 connections rule. Get 6 people around you that are your support network that will help you and you will help them. And some of those people for me, you know, they give me a cuddle when I need it. They give me a kick up the backside sometimes when I need it. They tell me I'm doing all right sometimes, and that's all I need. You know, I've ended up with a business that I don't really want. I'm not in it to run a business, and one of the most stressful things about what we do is actually trying to grow a business so we'll have more impact. I'm in a world that I don't want to be in, and often, you know, the things that make me most anxious are something that I've created weirdly on the back of this thing that I want to do to help. And so I've had to have different people in my world from a backup point of view. And I think that's absolutely essential. You know, in this space, the expectation that you have to have all the answers. And as you were saying, again, that idea as a bloke that it's irritating because you don't fix it. Somebody said to me, probably just when I was starting this, how would you view your journey around mental health? Because your story and all those kind of things will ultimately be something that's beneficial for people. I said, I see it. And the only way I can understand it, which is why I never think I'll have a solution to this, and I'm okay with that, which a lot of blokes aren't, is that I see it a little bit like coaching, in the same way that I was coached as a footballer. I from being, I don't know, 5 or 6 when I started playing football and people started to coach me with different things, there were still things that I still do. I play 5-a-side on a Thursday evening. My nephew's 14 and I'm 47, and we're now playing on the same pitch, which makes me feel extremely old. There are still things that I do that I learnt when I was 5, even though he's faster than me, quicker than me, and now probably bigger than me, that still probably allow me to play on that pitch. There are still things that I'm not doing now through coaching, because I'm not as quick and my brain's a lot better than my feet are, that I don't use anymore. But equally, every time I play, there's still something I'm learning, or there's still something I'm remembering, or there's still something, I go back to being 10 when somebody once told me something about defending or attacking that I still use to this day, and I can picture the person. And I think it's like anything, isn't it? If this is seen as an ongoing project, something that you're managing that you don't necessarily need to fix, something that you get better at. I still use counselling techniques that I used 10 years ago. There's a lot of things that I got in professional counselling that I don't need anymore. But some of those things I can also pass on to other people. A great breathing exercise. I don't need to go to counselling to learn an 11-7 breathing exercise, but I can pass it on to somebody else because it takes the stress away, maybe from an email that's come through, that you just give yourself a minute, and it's passing that information on, so that I'm almost saying that there should never be an end point to this, because the better I do, the more space and capacity it gives for me to invest in other people, which is, again, is valuable for our own journeys, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure. I think having tools that you might not use today but can use tomorrow is really important. I think telling people about those tools is as equally as important, right? The more you can sort of pass this on and get it to more people, the better, for sure. To use your analogy of football, I guess a lot of men that are deeply affected at this, it's sort of like grassroots level. So sort of into the pubs and these sort of areas. You talked about the Ask Twice campaign, and one campaign that I actually kind of enjoyed was the Calm one with Beavertown, the crisps with the bag that you opened, half opened, a traditional way of opening a bag in a pub, right, to share a packet of crisps. And it had some deeper questions in the middle, and that sort of stuff I kind of liked. I thought that was quite well executed. I would love to get into some of the stuff that you've been doing and some of the people that you've been partnering with as well.
Yeah, again, I think because I operate maybe slightly differently in this space, my background's creative and marketing, and I think when I came into this, I came in with nothing more complicated than I wonder whether some of the things in my story would help other people. What helped me? How can we create that? The legacy started with, I want to save the world, and it's not changed from that. I genuinely do. If it's a global problem, let's create a global solution. But equally, we've broken that down and gone, well, it's actually about saving your world, and your world might be you. So that's the first person we save, and then the wider world. If everybody's saving their own little world, all of a sudden, we use the tagline, saving the world starting in Burnley, because Burnley needs it as much as anywhere else. And everybody's got a Burnley, haven't they? It's factually correct. So we started off when we set the business up, and we were doing the training and all those kind of things. And we set up 2 weeks before COVID, which was a really strange time to start this stuff. We did some online things, which were great, but we always knew that this business was about relationship. It was about face-to-face and eye-to-eye contact. And, we had a lot of conversations with businesses towards the end of COVID about going in and delivering training sessions. And, a lot of the feedback was positive. What you do is brilliant. Your price points are great. Our staff need it. We're just going to wait another 6 months to see what the land looks like. And, from a marketing point of view, I sat back and went, I don't know what to do with that. Price is right, product's right, and people need it. Marketing 101, we've ticked all the boxes, but we still can't get to the people we're being told need help. And I just kind of sat back and went, what's helped me? Beer with a mate, coffee with a mate, conversations in normal places. Maybe that's how we get to those people. Without the permission of one person or two people that are funding a training program or whatever, how do we get to where those people are? And everybody was back in pubs and restaurants because COVID had finished. And I went, I want to get there, and had a bit of a throwaway comment with a friend of mine and said, I want to stick a wellbeing message on a can of beer. And he went, you can't. It's not good for your mental health. And I went, well, to be honest, I've done a lot of work with the recovery community. I know that's only a small percentage of the population. I'm really aware of, alcohol not being great for your mental health. But I'm talking about something that was really good for me. A couple of pints with my mate before football every other Saturday was brilliant for me. And it's not really about beer. It's about an environment. So let's stick it on a bag of coffee as well, because that's not good for your mental health. And he went, right, okay, you're going to do alcohol-free and decaf? And I went, no, because I'd send my mate a really good beer or really good coffee, because I'm a bit of a beer and coffee ponce, and so are my mates. So if I send them a rubbish beer, I'm just creating a campaign. If I send them average coffee, why are they going to buy it again? I'm going, I need to create a product here that people continue to buy because the product's great. That isn't just gimmicky. It's not just let's do 2,000 cans of beer with a nice message on, we'll throw a campaign out, get some awareness, and people have forgot about it in 6 months. How does the product actually start this real conversation? So we came up with this tagline of real conversations powered by mates. How do we create a product that effectively helps the mate to start the conversation loudly or quietly? You can send the product to your mate, you can sit in the pub and have a conversation, but equally something linked to that product allows you future reference to support and help. So I was sat at home, I don't know whether you've seen it, but there's a wine brand called 19 Crimes. Other wine brands are available, obviously. And I was just sat at home kind of pondering this thing, scanned the label on the front, and it gives you the information about the crime that's linked to the bottle. And went, that's all we've got to do. All we've got to do is link a physical product to some digital help and support. And actually, let's create something for the mate that wants to help but doesn't know where to start. Doesn't know how to have the conversation, doesn't know what to do next, rather than just something for the person that's struggling. Because there seemed to be a lot of people helping the person that was struggling, nobody helping the mate that wanted to help. For all the great counselling and stuff I got, it was only minimal in the rest of my life. I was still in work, I was still with pals, I was doing all that kind of stuff, and I thought, let's try and widen it. So, yeah, we did that. We went as Lancashire as we possibly could and created anything I could think of linked to conversation. We did biscuits, coffee, beer, tea, designed them to a point of they needed to stand up to the best of the best in the competition. They needed to sit on a supermarket shelf alongside Costa and Brewdog. So invested quite heavily in the design of it, created a brilliant product, created something that people were really interested in, created an absolute logistical nightmare for ourselves because they were all our products managed for us. And I was like, hold on a second, I'm sending beers to, Brian in Basingstoke when I want to be doing mental health support. How do we, one, make this easy for ourselves, but equally, how do we take this from 2,000 cans of beer on our little Shopify site to something that makes a bigger difference? We need to partner with bigger organisations than ourselves. So started to have the conversation, very much about reach rather than profit. And I kind of went, if we get less money per product, but we still get something that allows us to continue this journey going, we'll reach more people. So yeah, we did a product last year with a brewery from Burnley called Morehouses. They pitched the product as twice into the Wetherspoons pub chain. They were doing a beer festival over a couple of weeks, and they pitched 40,000 pints into Wetherspoons, and 40,000 pints went into Wetherspoons. And the QR code that just sat on this pump clip was scanned hundreds of times during this 2-week period. And all we did was create this really simple landing page that explained who we were, why the beer was called what it was, gave people a few little hints and tips about asking twice and what to do next. And just signposted into some of the national professional support that was available. Since then, we've done another kind of short run of beer products with a different brewery, and we're now working with a brewery called Beartown over in Congleton, and we've got 2 products with them that are now available 365 days a year that are primarily designed to go into amateur sports clubs and behind the bar of cricket clubs, rugby clubs, and all that kind of stuff. Why? Because that's where people are on a regular basis in a more relaxed fashion. We've also got a beer called Proper Natter in a pub in Burnley called the Royal Dyche, which is kind of quite well known for Sean Dyche being the Burnley manager, and very regularly gets visited by Sky Sports pundits and bits and bobs. So we're working with the landlady really closely with this really Burnley-driven beer, because people are going and going, Proper Natter, I get that, makes sense. And it's getting a lot of traction, and she's just created something particular and specific for her client group, and that's what we're doing. We've got a QR code that can go anywhere, and the reach effectively is endless. So we've got some coffee stuff coming up next year. We've done some comedy nights on the back of the beer things we're talking about. I mean, the beauty of the QR thing is it can be on anything. So yeah, we've got a few little plans to put it into different pockets of places where people are effectively having conversation and are comfortable talking about other things. Why can't we make this a little bit more comfortable?
Well, that's the thing, right? When it comes to, so for me, I'm a big believer in doing and making an effort towards getting out of whatever situation you're in, right? But if I was to rewind 2.5 years ago, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want to be looking for gyms or healthy food and things like that. I just wanted to have a conversation with someone and talk about how I was feeling, I guess. And as a marketer, you'll know men are notoriously impossible to market to. So it sort of makes sense to stick it under their noses rather than try and get them somewhere else.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that we did was that we thought about the friend in this piece, because nobody ever does. And we went, actually, what would make it easier for you to say to your mate, I know you're struggling? And it would be, do you want to come out and do the thing that we are used to doing? Whether that's going to the footy, going on a walk, going for a run, going to the pub, whatever that looks like. How do we make that conversation starter as easy as we possibly can for the person that feels so uncomfortable about doing that, but is absolutely crying out to help the mate? Put it in a place where you're comfortable being with your mate. That was the basic. We thought we'd get a lot of kickback, to be honest, from the beer stuff. When we did our independent stuff, I was all right with that. I thought when we put it into spoons, this will get slated by somebody. Yeah. And it didn't. Even on things like Untapped, people were reviewing the beers and going, this is a brilliant idea. And I went, okay, great. Of course, we're cautious with it. We're not producing 8% and 10% beers. We're doing low-level beers. We're doing all that kind of stuff. But, there's a level of common sense that have gone into it. But the response has been brilliant, not only from people that are going into pubs, but people that are in the pub trade, that we're now having conversations about how do we upskill bar staff who people talk to all the time because they're going in the pub 3 or 4 times a week, having those conversations. They never ask how the person behind the bar's doing, but they might unpack the world with them. Same for hairdressers, tattoo artists, beauty industry. So again, all of those things where we're just going, where are people sat having conversation, where maybe we don't just need to look after the person having the conversation, we also need to look after the person they're having the conversation with, and just put it in normal places. And the more we can do that, hopefully the more normal this conversation becomes.
I think there's a lot of work done around carers and like the support for them. I think that's a big thing. And I guess to simplify it, that you're the carer when it comes to this situation, when it's opening up. So makes
I think that's it. Everybody's the carer. I think we're just expanding the label and title that people have given, where people have put a lot of money into a sector, like you say, the carers and all that kind of stuff. If you are brought into this conversation, you are the carer, aren't you? Absolutely. Yeah. And the first person you need to care for is yourself. And often that's the first person you don't look after. We talk a lot about that element where people need to be confident and say, actually, do you know what? I'm not the best person to look after you at the moment. I'm struggling. That gives you, a bit of, I guess, shared experience, but equally, using a really basic phrase that we always do. If you're drowning, the last person you want to save is a non-swimmer, innit? And having the confidence, if you are that person in the mix, to say, do you know what? Me helping you out doesn't help you and it doesn't help me, but here's an option. Here are alternatives. It's why your mate network needs to be big. I'm not brilliant at the moment, but Steve's doing great. Can we have a chat and look after each other? And because it pinpoints to one person usually, HR, mental health, first aid, whatever it is, somebody gets a label, so all of a sudden they're the solution for everybody. It's very rare that people are turning around and going, how are you doing? Before I tell you how I'm doing. And that's important. Well, it's equally important to look after yourself, isn't it? You can't help other people if you're pouring from an empty cup.
For sure. So, Dave, in regards to the men's space as a whole, is there anything that you are seeing that you really like, and also what do you want to see more of in the men's space in the coming years?
What I'm really loving at the moment is the level of creativity in the space. I think where we were potentially once quite unique in this space, there are a few people that I'm starting to have conversations with that are doing some brilliant stuff, and that's really pleasing. I think the collaboration in the space is a lot better than it was as well. We found when we started that, oddly, but again, understandably, because a lot of this was charitable, people didn't want a partner because they were all chasing the same funding. So if you were partnering with other people and enhancing their offer, you were almost putting your own offer under threat. We don't see that as much anymore. I think probably because we found our own space and we're operating in a slightly different space. We don't want to do mental health first aid training. We don't want to be an EAP provider. What we want to do is make all of those things more successful, more accessible. Everything from, yoga to suicide prevention. That's the space that we are operating in. And all of those things can potentially help somebody, can't they? I think a lot more, for me, what I'd like to see in the male space is a little bit more, not vulnerability, that's probably not the right word, but a little bit less tokenism in the bigger areas. I like the fact that the FA Cup is sponsored by a mental health organisation. I'd like somebody to be talking about it on the Sunday after it's taken place on the Saturday. It feels quite advertising at the moment, that influence into larger arenas like the sporting arenas. We find it really hard to get into football grounds, for example, because there's so much red tape attached to contracts with commercial and contracts with this, that and the other. I'd also like people to start seeing this as not just a charitable entity. Again, using football as an example, we always get pointed towards the community foundation. And I'm going, I don't want to be pointing to the community foundation. They're already doing brilliant things. But the majority of things that they do are for people that are already struggling with these challenges. I want to speak to the fella that's on the turf on a Saturday afternoon with his partner and his kids, who needs to talk about this now, rather than wait until he meets the criteria of one of your services. So I think there's an element of that we'd like to get involved with. But I think it feels like it's heading in the right direction for me. I'd just like to see a lot more coming down from the top, which is going to take time. I'm not a patient man, unfortunately. Can we do a little bit more in the prevention space rather than starting to talk about this stuff because something tragic has happened? If there was more money out there to help people have this conversation when they were doing well, I'm absolutely convinced we would keep more people on the planet. And I think it's as simple as that.
I can't disagree with that statement. I think that's 100% true. Whether there's any fact to back it up or not, I think it's 100% true. Dave, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you today. I could speak to you for hours. It would be great fun.
Thanks, Matt.
I will leave the final thoughts with yourself, and please let people know where they can find you if they want to hear more about you.
Wonderful. Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time, mate. Much appreciated. So yeah, Six Connections is the organisation. sixconnections.co.uk is the website. All of our social media is powered by mates. But yeah, please check us out. Please link up. If you've got questions or thoughts or anything that you think we can partner on or help you out with, that's what we're here to do. The more collaborations we've got, the more people we can reach, the more people we can help, which doesn't seem like a bad thing to me.